How are you? These days,
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. We apologize again, especially for those of you who didn't hear the first apology about the discrepancy of the start time. I'll be like the throwaway. We hope that by the time I finish my introduction, those who are coming at their nusach of when they should come will come and not miss anything of the major presentation tonight. So first of all, I just want to begin by thanking Rabbi Foxbrenner for arranging this series. Rabbi Foxbrenner, as you know, is constantly generating different programs for the shul, and particularly when it comes to marriage, he and his wife have been very involved in facilitating all kinds of formats for us to deal with one of the most critical aspects of our lives, which is our relationships. I also want to thank Dr. Feldman for being available. Thank you very much for making yourself available. We know that your time is very, very precious, and night times are also very important to you, and you're giving them to us, so we thank you very much. And I just want to pause for a minute for us to appreciate that as a community, as a shul, we have programs like this in which we actually not only come to learn together and to daven together, but we also come together to deal with life together. It's not just that we come individually to hear to hear various thoughts and important approaches, attitudes, techniques, insights, self-awareness, but we do it together. And that's an important dimension of the life that we share, that we're in a community where we have a common language, where these kinds of things are significant to us and important, and we embrace them. So it's a pleasure to be able to see this kind of a thing happen in the show. Before I turn this over to Aaron, tonight is really going to be Dr. Feldman's presentation. Many of you probably already know that Dr. Feldman has really done a fantastic job in presenting the 5 love languages, and his reputation precedes him. But before I turn it over to him, I just want to make a comment or two about the whole concept of language in relationship. As soon as we talk about language, we're talking about responsibility. We're talking about a person being thoughtful and actually being interested in what he or she is saying, and not just saying with words, because as we know, language is not just words, but language is also actions or inaction, facial communication. There are all kinds of languages. When we're talking about that kind of communication, we're talking about somebody behind it, and that means that somebody is actually being responsible and making choices. So if you think about it in relationships, to the degree that a person takes responsibility in a relationship, to that degree a relationship is possible. To the degree that a person doesn't see him or herself as responsible, to that degree they can't be counted on in relationship. And we all know the extreme example of somebody who says, well, that's just the way I am. That kind of a person is somebody who is simply saying, you can't count on me for anything. I'm just the way I am. And I'm not responsible for what happens in relationship with me, because that's just the way I am. So when we talk about language, we're talking about the most unique aspect of the human consciousness, and we're talking about the ability of a human being to be responsible, and that's what makes relationships so potent, so fulfilling, and so frustrating, because it really goes to the core of what it is to be a human being. Finally, just an observation, the ultimate metaphor for the relationship between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Klal Yisrael is the Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, which is a love song, meaning that the language of love is the language that HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Klal Yisrael have with each other and dance with each other. And if you look at Shir HaShirim carefully, you will notice that it is not an entirely uplifting song, meaning that there are problems, there are challenges. The lover in Shir HaShirim isn't always so cooperative, isn't really playing by the expectations of the other. And you could even say that we have love languages that form the relationship that we have with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and HaKadosh Baruch Hu with us. And both parties quote-unquote, take responsibility, I'll say kaviyachol for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but both parties take responsibility for the way that they broadcast the love and the relationship that they have with each other, and the level of care and choice that they have in it. So when we're talking about love, we're really talking about something as holy as possible, something that actually goes to the inner sanctum of the human heart and of relationships. And I think we're all fortunate that we have the resource that we have here in our community. Dr. Feldman, it makes a tremendous difference to our community. And Aaron, thank you so much for making yourself available, and we are eager to hear you tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all for coming. I think in future weeks it's going to be more of a partnership. But I told Rabbi Feldman the only way I'm going to do this is that the first time he lets me talk the entire time. That's not really true. I didn't say that. But I'm happy to be here, and as you can see, there are two more topics for men that are coming up, and I would like to start with a sincere tefillah and a sincere expression of what I hope that in some ways that Rabbi Feldman and I can be zocheh in increasing the shalom that exists in relationships in this community, and to have the siyata d'shmai to do that, that would be an amazing source and a wonderful thing to be a part of, and if we're not, it's not my fault. That's also, I'm trying to model both sides of the equation. Okay.
But Feldman, let me violate our agreement.
It's predictable. It's predictable.
I admitted one thing, which is, first of all, the 5 love languages, the special Jewish Marriage Initiative edition that Rabbi Mordechai Pollack worked so hard and forwarded, is available for sale over here at a very, very reasonable price, by the way. And we just want to call your attention to the fact that Rabbi Pollack, of course, has been and continues to be involved and committed to developing Shalom Bayis in this community and in communities around the country. We offer him a tremendous yasher koach. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So there are a couple of people I have an over-under with in terms of the line for how many interruptions Rabbi Feldman is going to do. And this over-under, and the betting line is not closed. There's 4 minutes before that. He is very brave for actually doing this with me, because he knows that sometimes I don't know what's going to come out of my mouth. But I want to get right to the content. To me, this is it's a nice topic. It's an easy topic. For those of you, by a quick raise of hand, how many are familiar with the 5 love languages, been exposed to it? So many of you are, you know them, and maybe you have found them useful in your relationships. I have found that in my practice, that when I work with couples, I'm saying over 90%, if not all of the couples I work with, at some point early in my work with them, I'm teaching them the 5 love languages. What I have found is very often when people are stuck, and you can get mired in being stuck, but that sometimes when you help people focus on an easy way of kind of framing and understanding how to show love to their spouse in a positive way, using the analogy of putting money in the bank, but very often when you create an atmosphere where each spouse is feeling loved, it becomes sometimes much easier to work on the areas where they're stuck, and sometimes it actually just makes that they're not stuck, and suddenly those areas don't seem to be so important and salient anymore. And so it's just a lovely, lovely tool framework that I think is easy to comprehend. You have to work to understanding it and get to a deeper understanding, so I'm looking forward to sharing with you. It's a lot of fun. And I think that the way that I'd like to start is that, one aspect or one feature of a healthy relationship is when each individual is committed to meeting the needs of their spouse, and when when they feel that their needs are being met, right? When each one of us in a relationship feels love. So the premise of this idea is, well, if we each want to show love and we each want to give love, is that very often, he discusses that in the beginning of a relationship, people talk about romantic love, you fall in love, that romantic love, that high, is really biologically or naturally only lasts between about 6 to 18 months, depending on the person, right? And then he says, after that period of time, once you've decided to be with your spouse, then every day you're with your spouse, you have a choice. You can either love your spouse that day or not. And if you decide to act in a loving manner, then you will stay in love. There will be a feeling, an atmosphere of love in your relationship. If you don't, then you won't have it. But the problem occurs is that very often is that the way one person expresses love is not the way the other one understands or feels love, using the analogy of language. So if I tell my wife in flowery Italian all the time how much I love her, and she doesn't speak a word of Italian, right? She may be able to tell I'm saying something nice, but it's not going to have the impact that I'm wanting it to. It's not going to be reciprocated. It's not going to hit home because we speak different languages, right? And so that eventually, if I keep showing love and it's not being acknowledged or it doesn't seem like it's hitting home, and I never hear in flowery Italian how much she loves me, so then my love tank is empty and it gets hard to keep giving and showing that love. So when we talk about the 5 love languages, I think it'll become clear the idea that it's very often you'll see couples who feel like they're constantly saying, I do so much for my spouse, or I show love so much else. They never acknowledge it, I don't feel appreciated, and they feel depleted. How come it's not being noticed? How come it's not being acknowledged? And vice versa. And I think that very often when I see couples is they're both wanting to show each other love. They're just frustrated because they feel like it's not hitting home, it hasn't been appreciated, and they're not getting the love they want back. So when we start talking about the 5 love languages, we are going to jump right in and go through them, right? I think that the idea that we're talking will become clear. So there are 5. If you're here with your spouse, if you're not here with your spouse, it's fine. You know, the way I want you to think about when we go through the 5 is most people have 2, right? Out of the 5, they have 2 that are really on the top, that really are their primary, and they're all very nice. And so I want you to think about this after you go through the 5, what are your top 2, and what do you think your spouse's top 2 are? And then afterwards, when you tell them and you get it wrong, you can fight about how it's possible you didn't know. Okay? But you'll be surprised how natural, how much confusion sometimes there can be. And sometimes, by the way, it's not as simple to identify our own love languages, but we'll work through it. We'll take some questions around that and you know, at the end. So let's just start with one love language. The first love language, just talked about it with the client today, right? Because one of the things that he expressed was he feels like he does so much for his wife and he never feels like she acknowledges, doesn't feel like she appreciates it, doesn't. And so the first love language we're going to talk about is something called words of affirmation. If your love language is words of affirmation, you feel loved when your spouse expresses that love through expressing words, compliments, affirmations, appreciation, where they tell you, thank you so much for everything you do. You're amazing, right? You look beautiful. You are so good with the kids. I'm really lucky to be with you. Wow, it's amazing how much time and energy you give to the community. As long as it's not followed with, it'd be nice if you spent some time at home. Right? But the idea being, right, that people very often feel loved when they feel like their contributions are being acknowledged and their husband, wife is expressing it by words. I mean, I haven't done this in a while, but I actually have, many years ago, would tap my wife on the shoulder and say, Devar, she'd go out, I go, I'd really love it if you worship me more. And she'd just say, I know. Okay, that was fine. But I'm saying, right, meaning that might be, but that's, you know, notice me, and notice my accomplishments, and there are different dialects within certain languages, meaning different words of affirmation will work with some people and won't work with others. There's a couple that I remember that I worked with, not in this community, not a Jewish couple, and they hadn't been married that long, they did not have children, and I identified with them that we were pretty sure one of his love languages was words of affirmation. So she was making an effort to give him words of affirmation. As she happened to come for a session, he wasn't able to make it, he had a work conflict, and so I said, how's it going? She goes, you know, I don't think you're right. I don't think these words of affirmations is really what he likes. I go, I was pretty sure I wasn't wrong. I mean, it's possible. It's happened twice. I said, but then I was pretty sure that that's what it is. I said, well, what are you saying? So she said to me, well, on Saturdays, he volunteers and he coaches Pee Wee football. And he is really good with the kids. And I, first of all, have been really telling him how amazing he is, because he works hard during the week, how amazing he is that he gives of his time to these kids, and how great it is that he does it. And I go with him to watch him coach, and I just tell him how good he is with the kids. She goes, right. So I think I knew why. So when he came the following session, I said, well, let's ask him. So I said, have you noticed that your wife's really been laying it on? He said, I go, do you like it? He goes, well, it's better than the alternative. Right? And she was like, well, that's not what I'm looking for. I said, okay, so then tell her. I said, we were pretty sure that words of affirmation would be something that would work. She said, well, he said, well, to tell you the truth, he turned to her, he goes, I already know it's great that I volunteer for Pee Wee football, because I know I'm good with the kids. He said, what I'd really like to hear is how my place in your life impacts you. And to know that my presence in your life is having a positive impact on you. That's what I'd love to hear. So that's a different dialect, words of affirmation, right? Acknowledging, whereas for some people, telling your spouse, wow, if you're married to somebody in Clay Kodesh in the Rabbit, your students are really lucky. It's amazing how dedicated you are. Your congregation, I know how much you care. I see what you do, the work you put in, right? What a schus, it's unbelievable. That also is words of affirmation. So the first love language, words of affirmation, okay? Next, and by the way, obviously some people don't need that as much. Nice, but they don't need it. Maybe we'll talk about it later. And by the way, if for some of you who sometimes try and compliment stereotypically your wife every once in a while and you try words of affirmation and they brush it off, it doesn't mean their love language isn't words of affirmation. It's just making it a little harder. But that's something important. All right, let's go to another one. If another love language, let's say, is something called quality time. If your love language is quality time, you feel love when your spouse shows love by giving you the gift of time. So, gift of time could be, our lives are busy, you don't see each other during the day, and at the end of the day, you're laying in bed and maybe, you're playing on your phone, you're on your laptop, you're just trying to chill, and your spouse comes into the room, and who has energy at that time of night, and you close your laptop, you put down your phone, and you say, sweetie, I feel like we've been busy all day, I would just love to connect with you just for a few minutes, hear how your day was, tell me what's going on. If your wife or your husband's love language is quality time, then they are going to feel loved. Right? They're going to feel loved because you gave them the gift of time, the gift of attention, and really focused on what they were saying. You took an interest. Sometimes you don't have to say anything. You just have to actually make eye contact. Right? So if one of you is working on one side of town and you're driving by your spouse's office and you say, by the way, I had a meeting on your side of town. I'm going to be driving by your office. If you want to meet at that Starbucks, I've got 10 minutes. If your spouse's love language is quality time, they're going to feel loved because you made spending time with them a priority and you stole some time because you just wanted to be with them. Now, I want to just show you, we'll talk about this more, how language is natural and language is cultural, and that if your love language isn't the same as your spouse's, you're going to interpret the bid, the request for love, the offer of love incorrectly. So I'm going to share with you a personal example, which when I share with you, all of you may feel like, why would we listen to a lecture from him about marriage? And you might walk out, which is justified. Right? But you'll hear this because this is what would go on in my house early on. Early on is very relative. It might have taken me 19 years to learn. We're not sure. But I'm saying, right, we say early on, is Devorah one of her love languages? One of my wives, she told me not to mention her by name, but one of my wife's, right? Because nobody would know, right? So one of my wife's love languages, right, is quality time. Clearly, that might not be mine. Because early marriage, we got married young, we moved here, I was in school, had a schedule, and I'm organized, I like to cut coupons, so one of the ways I would contribute is by doing a lot of the grocery shopping, which she was very happy and appreciative of. And so every once in a while, though, she would say, Aaron, I'm going to Kroger, do you want to come? Now, you won't be able to guess my reaction. My reaction was to get annoyed. You might think, why? Because I thought she was being passive-aggressive. I'd say, Devorah, if you want me to go to Kroger, why don't you just ask? And she'd look at me like I was an idiot, which in this case was 100% accurate, and say, I don't want you to go to Kroger, I'm going. I want to know if you want to come. And I said to her, I understand. If you're going, why would I go? She goes, fine, don't go. And I'm like, hey, I'm a good husband. I can tell, I can sense. She's annoyed. I'll go. I said, you know what, I'm going to go. She goes, you don't have to go. I go, no, I'm coming. So we walk into Kroger, right, and I say, Devorah, can you give me half the list? And she says, no, I want you to do it with me. And I said, but then it'll take twice the time. Yeah. Okay, some of us learn quicker than others, but the point being, if you think about it, because for me going to Kroger is a task, it's about efficiency, it's about accomplishing the task, but for her that was an opportunity for me to make her feel loved. Now we've learned. She doesn't say, Aaron, I'm going to Kroger, you want to come? She's saying, Aaron, I'm going so-and-so, I'd love it if you'd keep me company. And I've learned to hear, to not listen. It makes no difference where she's going. I don't think about when she said, if somebody says to you, do you want to go to the ballet? Do you want to go to this? You're thinking, no, the destination is irrelevant. If I'm asked, do you want to keep me company, then I know what's at stake is I have an opportunity to make my wife feel loved and feel cared for. And for whatever reason, if I walk aimlessly through the aisles with her of Kroger, she is going to feel closer to me and our marriage is going to be better. As long as I don't criticize and say, I understand, if you would just do this in order, we wouldn't have to be walking back and forth. No, that's not the time, right? So that's the point. The point being is that is quality time. And there's a point where I'm only exaggerating a little, but meaning if that's not what your love language is, then your spouse is going to be showing you bits and thinking they're asking you for love, asking you for connection, and you're not going to pick up on it. You're not going to miss it. And so we go to the next one. The next love language is something called acts of service. If your love language is acts of service, you feel loved when your spouse shows that love by thinking of you, paying attention to you, and doing something that makes your life easier. If you're in a rush, you have a meeting, and your spouse says, sweetie, I put your briefcase, your papers, your file that you were working on, your coffee, it's right by the door, it's all ready, I know you're in a rush. You're going to feel loved because your spouse thought of you, right? Am I moving too much? No, it's okay, right? Your wife thought of you, right? And did something to make your life easier, right? So, he talks about in the book, he said he met this couple where he said the husband seemed to have the least personality of any man he ever met. Come on, there's got to be a lot of competition for that. But I'm saying, but he said, right, was, this person, was not warm, not this, and I don't know what they were meeting with him, but he asked the wife, why does your marriage work? She goes, what do you mean? I can tell he loves me. Well, why? Because every time there's a light bulb that needs to be changed, anytime something needs to be done in the house, I ask him, he does it. Right? So they got lucky. Her love language was acts of service, and he was really good at that. Because he sure wasn't giving words of affirmation, right? But if your love language is, so if you're, call your spouse, you say, that bar mitzvah, the thing we're going to tonight, I was actually had a meeting at this side of town, and I picked up the outfit from the dry cleaners that you wanted to wear. You don't have to run out and do that. So if your wife's love language is acts of service, right, then she is going to feel loved, right? Because you thought about her and you made her life easier. Whereas some people, acts of service are just practical things that need to get done in life, and they're appreciated, but they don't speak to intimacy, they don't speak to love, i.e. in my marriage. Meaning that early in marriage, here's what would happen. Devorah, or my wife, Mrs. Feldman, would go, not that, this is too confusing, right? My wife would go to a meeting, right? And I'd say to the kids, okay, guys, let's surprise mommy, okay? I'm going to go do everything in the kitchen. You guys put away the clothes and everything, do the rooms. When the mommy comes home, the house will be perfect, right? Now, she'd appreciate that. That's nice. But if I wanted to do something for our intimacy, for our connection, for our feelings of closeness, I would have been better off trashing the house, writing a little note on a napkin and putting a Hershey's Kiss on the pillow. That would have done a lot more. What I was doing was what I would have liked. I was giving acts of service, right? Again, appreciated, but not an expression of intimacy, of closeness, of something that makes my wife feel connected to me. And I told her it's a learning disability. It should, because I'm really good at it, and it's her problem. But no, that's really not what we're supposed to do. The point being, right, is we're supposed to figure out, we're supposed to grow, we stretch ourselves to understand. An analogy I sometimes give when couples I talk about trying to learn your spouse's love language, I say, let me ask you a question. I'll say, if your wife asks you to scratch her back, she can't reach it, are you going to scratch it if you can, right? You'll scratch it, right? Middle time, I don't want to not get too personal. Okay. I'm saying, right? So yeah, and then if she says to you, okay, no, lower, is your responsibility, will you stop being so critical, just be happy and scratching your back? No, you're going to say, where, right? Because you want to get where it itches. Think about the love languages that way. Sometimes, we do something, it didn't do anything. How come that? I'm showing you love. Why don't you? No, think about it. Your goal is to get where it itches. And the only way you get where it itches is if you actually keep scratching and you try and figure it out. Or sometimes just ask. But, it's sometimes that we get so discouraged when something we do doesn't work. Well, maybe you didn't get where it itches. Maybe you're speaking the wrong language. Right? And that's actually an analogy where I sometimes, for example, words of affirmation. when I'm asking, when we figure out, we assume that one couple, and I want them to encourage us, so I'll tell the spouse, here's what I want you to do. I want you to give your spouse 3 words of affirmation a day until our next session, which you think about, it's a total investment of like 42 seconds, right? I want one to be a text, because I think what I've heard now in today's day is people text. That's what I've heard. I don't know. It's hard for me, I can't see so well. But I'm saying that texting is something people do, my kids tell me. Right, so one should be a text, and the other 2 should be in person, either on the phone or directly in front. I said, but here's what I want you to do. I want you to do research. I said, when you come back, and the spouse is in front of me, I mean, they're both there. I'll say, when you come back, I want you to actually tell me which type of words of affirmation hit home. Meaning, I want you to figure out what dialect, what variation. Were there ones that you noticed worked better? Were there ones that didn't? Because what that does, it sets them up to not feel frustrated when they're trying and it doesn't work or it doesn't go over well. Because I'm actually asking them and saying, hey, right, see if you can figure out where it itches, figure out what her dialect is. And it's a lot of fun when I ask, the couples come back and I say, okay, you did it. I'll sometimes ask, let's say the husband's working, and then I'll turn to the wife, I'll say, did he do it? And she'll say, he did. And I said, how'd that feel? She goes, great. I said, okay, we're ready for the question? Yes. So I said, then I'll always ask, do you appreciate the fact that he made an effort there? Yes. I said, okay, now let's have some fun. And I'll say to him, I said, okay, if you were to guess which of your comments over the week do you think really hit home? And it's always fun to watch that interchange, like if they get it, they don't get it, but that makes it fun. It takes a lot of the tension out, right? You're learning a new language. It's going to be awkward, right? I'm working with this with a couple now where the husband is not expressive. He says he's uncomfortable, right? He says part of his problem in giving words of affirmation is he feels like it comes out forced. So I said, well, do you mean it? He said, yes. I go, so what's forced? He goes, it's not that I don't express myself that way. I said, well, have you ever tried to learn a new language? I said, if you're not willing to break your teeth and make it sound forced, and you're never going to learn it. So I mean, like I remember when I went to American yeshiva after high school, and where all the shiurim in English, and I had friends who went, right? And they went, and they my roommate, my first year in Eretz Yisrael, he was like, I'm in Eretz Yisrael, by the time I leave here, I'm going to be speaking Hebrew fluently. I said, good luck. You want to break your teeth on that? Great. I said, everybody here speaks English, right? I go into the makolet, I can ask for what I want in English, and then I get it. As long as I'm full, I'll be happy, right? So my friend learned Hebrew much faster. I didn't, because I didn't want to break my teeth on it. I didn't want to, it was harder. Had to make an effort. It's similar when you're learning a new language. It's okay if it comes out a little choppy. Okay, so what have we done? We've done 3 different love languages, right? Words of affirmation, quality time, acts of service. Any questions about any of those 3? There's 2 more, if my math is correct. Okay? Did I do enough of a job with acts of service? We're good with that? Okay? So next love language is something called receiving gifts. So if your love language is receiving gifts, you feel loved when your spouse shows that love, right, by giving a gift. A gift doesn't have to be a very expensive piece of jewelry, right? A gift could be a piece of chocolate. I know the kind, when we were dating, what type of chocolate my wife liked, and then suddenly I didn't see them as much, but if I'm in a store, if I'm in a BP and I see them, 3 for $1, I can come home at the end of the day and say, hey, Devar, I got you a gift. I spent $1.07, depending on which county I'm in, right? And I say, and I give her, but if her love language is receiving gifts, she feels loved because I thought about it and I expressed it in a gift, right? And so is by thinking about it, and here's the thing when we talk about cultural and gifts and language, love language, I would like to say, I would say, beware of the therapist that talks about his relationship with his own mother. I happen to be very close with my mother, right? However, she can call me a month after my birthday and say, hey, Aaron, did I forget your birthday again? And I go, yeah, Mom, I've been waiting by the phone. I don't care. It doesn't matter. It's not. Whereas my mother-in-law, in the 28 years, almost 29 years we've been married, once did my birthday card come a day late. Once. Right? She doesn't forget anybody's birthday. It's neurotic. Okay, no, it's not, it's beautiful. It's, right? It's wonderful. It's beautiful. It's right. But that's true. In other words, you see what's emphasized, how love is expressed, how love is communicated. And so what I find is interesting. So how many of you, when you think about getting a gift for your spouse, view it like this? Whether it's Hanukkah, anniversary, birthday, excuse my French, but getting these occasions are just an opportunity to screw up. Anybody think like that? Okay, I'm with you, right? I've learned, right? Usually if you think that way, that means receiving gifts is not your love language. Because if receiving gifts is your love language, then buying a gift for your spouse is fun. It's exciting. Because it's the same way if your love language, like when I shared with you that story about, okay, if my wife's going out of the house, has a meeting, okay guys, let's go around, I'm going to clean this part of the house, you guys do this, and it'll be great, right? You know, if you're in the mood to show love, you're excited, you're motivated, you're into it, right? Because you know it's an expression of love, right? But when you're feeling that gifts is just an opportunity to mess up and get it wrong, oh boy, I'm never going to get it right, here we go again, right? Then you're feeling it's a burden, and you're going to mess up, that's because that's not your love language. If giving gifts was an expression of love, you would actually see it as an opportunity to be fun. Right? I mean, unless you were married to somebody who's just absolutely never was happy with anything. Right? Okay, so then maybe we get old. Right? I just want to see who looks at each other. We'll talk later. Okay, right? But that's receiving gifts, and it's such a powerful, powerful thing about receiving gifts. My wife said it to me best. I'm no different than any husband when I'm in trouble. I'm like a deer in headlights. It doesn't make a difference what I do for a living. I'm like hoping, oh my gosh, I hope this isn't so bad. But one time she comes over to me, she goes, Aaron, you know how I spend a lot of time thinking about what to get you, like for Hanukkah and your birthday and stuff like that? I'm like, uh-huh, that's about it. Uh-huh. And she goes, well, do you know what I realized? Uh-uh. She goes, I realized that you don't care. I was like, oh boy. She said, but I like the things you get me. No, I do. She goes, no, I know you do because you use them. But what I realized is you don't care. I'm really getting confused here. She's like, the words seem like she'd be mad, but she didn't seem mad. She goes, but I realized, I said, okay. She goes, no, what I realize is you're the type of person that if you need something, you'll get it. And it doesn't give you any joy or make you feel good at all to receive it in the form of a gift. You're practical. You like to get it. And she said, and so you don't really care. I like, but again, I still thought I was in trouble. I said, but I like the stuff you give me. She goes, no, I know. I don't think you're listening to me. I go, now I'm in trouble for that too, right? I'm saying, no, I'm right. So what's going on? I'm all confused. So she says, but do you know why I do it? Something, because you love me? And she's like, well, yeah, but did you know why I do this? Why? She goes, because that's what I like. What I realize is you don't actually care. She says, from now on, right, when it comes to Hanukkah, birthdays, and stuff like that, we're going to save money, and I'm not going to get you anything. I'm like, okay. And she goes, see? I go, oh, no, I mean, wrong answer. I know it. She was right, meaning, I think she goes, but listen to this, Aaron. You've got to do a better job doing it for me. And when she said it that way, it really resonated. She was right, meaning, in other words, that's how I looked at it. It was like just pressure, whereas, when you think about it, you say, wait a minute, this is an opportunity to make my spouse feel really good. So then it's a fun activity. Right? Even if it's not something you like, even if it's something you don't care about, you can learn that language. Okay? So we have something as receiving gifts. We've got 4. We're down to 1 more, right?
Eric?
Yes?
Why do we call it receiving gifts?
Meaning, you're asking about the Mimedaik and the Lashon.
Yeah, no,
meaning the receiving gifts. So I don't know how, I would imagine because it's what makes a person feel loved. Yes, it is also the way a person shows love can be giving gifts, but we're talking about the language is really focusing on the recipient, how it makes a person feel. Right? Your goal is to figure out where it itches for your spouse. Right? And okay, so then, good. So then now the next love language is something called physical touch. Right? So if your love language is physical touch, you feel loved when your spouse expresses that through a warm and tender touch. And we're not talking about just sexual intimacy. We're talking about a squeeze of the hand. So it's like I sometimes say, if you're sitting at the table, you're paying bills, and your husband or wife comes behind you and kind of squeezes your shoulders, kisses you in the back of the head, says, I love you. I call that a drive-by. Just takes like 4 seconds, right? And if your love language is physical touch, you feel warm and tender. It can change how you feel for the next hour. Whereas I have spouses who tell me like this, they use words like, if I'm washing dishes or I'm paying bills, I never know when my husband, my wife is going to grope me. Right? He's going to, right? Like they're always intrude. I'm like, oh, well, okay, right? But I'm saying, meaning why? And they might be fine. Their intimacy their private intimacy must be fine, might be fine, right? But what it's expressing is that person's love language is not physical touch. When they're doing something and somebody comes and gives them a bear hug or squeezes their shoulders, they see that as an intrusion. And it doesn't mean they're not attracted to their spouse, and it doesn't mean they don't love their spouse. It means they don't like to be touched unless they know it's coming and there's like actually an invitation and an itinerary. Right? That is the way some people are. You know, I always find that when I've got couples in my office and a tender or a sweet moment comes up, there's always one spouse that might reach over and put take their spouse's hand or put their hand on their spouse's knee. Usually it's that spouse, right, who is actually, right, the physical touch. I mean, I gave this workshop once. Several years ago, and then I bumped into this couple later. They were just, comedic. I don't really know how else to say it, but I don't know if they're still married now, but they were very funny, and they were like, they said, Aaron, you saved our marriage. I was like, well, I'm really happy about it, but like, no, you don't understand. And then the wife says, you don't understand. He was driving me crazy. She said, I'm a little bit, I know it, I'm rigid, I'm uptight. That's what you just said. She goes, and so but my husband is like, no matter what I was doing, if I was in the house, if I was paying bills, if I was saying, she used to go, she was like, if I'm walking by him with the thing of laundry, he's got to reach over and squeeze me and squeeze my shoulder or lean over and try to give me a kiss. And I'm like, don't you see I'm carrying laundry? Why do you always have to do that, right? And then he said, right, no, she's right. I would always be doing it. And I would say, I just want her to see how much I love her, and I don't understand why she's not reciprocating. So let me do it more so it gets through, right? And she said, I don't want to do it because I didn't want to do it because I don't want to encourage him, right? So she said they came out of my workshop, and here was their interchange. He turned to her and he said, sweetie, I promise you, from this day forward, I will never touch you again. She said, thank you. That is so sweet. And I will make more of an effort to touch you. And so I said, well, how's that working? And she said, he's doing a much better job of it than I am. She said, he is really, I don't ever feel like I'm going to be invaded. Like, he doesn't. But sometimes, he's at the end of the day, he's tired, he's sitting on the couch, and I'll walk by him, and then I'll remember, I just lost an opportunity, and I have to remind myself to go back. And she goes, all I have to do is lean over, put my hands on his knees, kiss him on the forehead, and he's in such a much better mood. Because his love language is physical touch. And just, I always think about it, put money in the meter. Think about the love language. All you have to do is put a nickel, a quarter in the meter, and you can park with your spouse the rest of your life. Right? Just keep putting money in the meter, and they'll feel loved, right? And those are the 5 love languages. So the question, though, that very often comes out is, so how do you know what your love language is? When you think about it here, you don't have to tell me what they are, but for those of you who are familiar with it, not familiar with it, whatever, but when you hear the 5 languages, do you instantly know what your top 2 are? How many of you know what your top 2 are right away? I'm not going to call on you. I know that you realize I'm not so dependable, so you may not want to take that risk. But you know me at all. Like I say, okay, no, I won't single any of you out, but then I actually will. So smart people, right? Okay, but some of you have maybe never been at one of my talks before. Okay, right? Right. So it's sometimes it can be confusing, and sometimes it takes a little while. So what's some of the ways that you can actually? And I wrote down like some of the ways you can figure it out. So one of the ways, actually, that I think works is think about when you are motivated to show love, what's your first instinct to do? Right? Before you knew what your spouse's love language was, right? And by the way, it's not just with your spouse. Sometimes you can learn it by the way you are with other people, meaning what is your natural tendency when you are showing love, when you want to make somebody in your life, to care about what's your go-to move, how do you do it, right? So that very often tells you what your love language is. Right? That's one aspect. Another thing is to fill in the blank here. The thing my spouse does or does not do that hurts me the most. Right? When you think about the answer to that, think about the language that's behind that hurt or absence, right? Or what does she do? What does she not do? What does he do? What does she not do? Right? What have you most often requested by your spouse? Right? What do you keep complaining about? In other words, think about it. Very often, what a common, I never get any of your attention. You never have any time for me, right? We never go out. Those things, right? It's like then you'll get spouse and say, I don't understand. Like, I asked you 4 months ago to change that light bulb. 4 months, right? Now, if a common complaint is the task, so then you might think, why is she making such a big deal? Why is he making such a big deal of it? Well, if your love language is acts of service, then when you ask your spouse to do something for you and they don't, the only way you can compute that is to say, well, if they loved me, they would do it. Because that's how you show love. It doesn't, you know, it's like acts of service, an instinct. You know, I'm usually up into our room first at the end of the day, so night Dvar can come upstairs to our room, and she can say, oh shoot, I forgot my drink, right? I like pop out of my bed, usually, depending how tired I am, and I go, she goes, what are you doing? I said, you said you drink? She goes, I wasn't asking you to get it, but instinctively, right? She forgot her drink, I want to get her drink. And then she'll say, I wouldn't do that for you, right? But, that's so beautiful, thank you. Right, but I'd spend time with you. Oh, well, that's nice too. Why don't you go get me my drink? She goes, but you have yours up here. I go, still, go get me my drink. Okay, so, you know, it helps to be married to somebody who's mature, just by the way. I've been told. So, you know, it's like, again, with the physical touch, if you're a physical touch person, so, you know, this is like, hear multiple spouses say that, I just don't understand why my husband, my wife, isn't hugging me more. It's a funny thing when you hear them say it, but they're always wanting, that's how they express love, and they love their spouse, and they express it, they want to hug, and then at some point, think about the tank being empty. They feel like they're always giving hugs, but they're never giving it back, right? So they stop, right? And then they're wondering, how come it's not coming back? You know, and the reason is because, yeah, your spouse isn't thinking about it. Right, because that's not his or her love language. It might be yours, and the only way, right, that they'll know that is if you actually say to them. And in the subsequent meetings, we're going to talk about more effective ways to say it. But if you think about, let's just use physical touch. In other words, here's a mistake we very often make. Very often when we're frustrated or upset with our spouse, we think that if we can tell them what they're doing wrong with explicit detail, how often they do that, and for how long it's been going on, and in how many areas it actually applies to, and they're like that because of their mother, they're going to say, thank you so much for pointing that out. Right? No, that's not going to work. You prosecute, you're going to get a defense. Right? The best way to ask your spouse for something is think about asking in a way that makes it the easiest for them to succeed. So I'm going to say the same thing twice. Right? Example I always use, Lisa. Lisa's husband says, Lisa, you've been so cold recently, you never touch me anymore, what's wrong with you? Now I'm going to say the same exact thing. Lisa, I really miss your touch. I love it when you touch me. It feels like it's been a long time. I just said the same thing twice. Right? But the first time, in order for Lisa's husband to get what he wants, Lisa has to hear something wrong with her, she's cold, and the word never. By the way, you say to your spouse, right, you never or you're never right and you're always wrong, unless you actually say to them, you know, you're always breathing and you never stop going to the bathroom. Right? Because if either of those stop, there's some serious consequences. But you can tell your spouse, you know, you never say anything nice to me. That's not true. In October, I did. You tell somebody never, they're going to come up with the exception, right? But more importantly, when you think about the difference between those two ways of expressing something to your spouse, in the first way, Lisa's walking away feeling that her husband is disgusted or disappointed in her. That's just going to be, that's the worst feeling for a spouse to have. The second way, Lisa may walk away hearing and being in touch with that her husband positively desires her affection. What a beautiful thing. Right? So that's a way to ask. So when we talk about doing this, it's something, you know, it's fun when you talk to your spouse and you get it right. But I usually end this talk before I take questions with, again, just showing my stupidity, right? But showing you, like, again, how it's not natural, right? The concept makes sense, but it takes work for you to learn a new language. And so this is a story that took place, Devar will know, but because I can tell you that we were doing a renovation in our house, and she had just become the president of the mikveh, and it was Erev Rosh Hashanah. So she was, I remember, there was a makeshift table in our living room. She was sitting with one of my older girls. They were trying to get a mailing out for the mikveh before Yom. She had a bunch of stuff in the oven. She's trying to get out. Our house was upside down, right? And I'm thinking it's Erev Rosh Hashanah. You know what I'm focused on? I'm focused on my ruchnius. That's it. Nobody else's. It's mine. You know, I've got to make sure that I've got to see my client. I want to make sure I see clients at home at night. I want to end my client on time because I want to make sure the last mile of the year that I daven b'tzibur, that I get to shul, and then tzlichus is a ridiculous early time. So I want to make sure as soon as Meyer's over, I get home, I get to sleep because I don't want to be tired. Erev Rosh Hashanah, who wants to be tired? I mean, right? You want to be focused. And then I'm thinking, wait a minute. All I'm doing is thinking about myself. That's it. And wait a minute. Part of my ruchni is part of going into Rosh Hashanah is connecting with my spouse in a loving manner. I said, so, all right, yes, I don't want to be tired because nobody wants to be around me when I'm tired, right? I said, so what can I do? So I said, I know what I can do. I said, I know what I do. Instead of going right to sleep after Marv, I said, you know what I'll do? It was Shabbos, like it was one of those years where Shabbos had just come and Rosh Hashanah, I don't remember what night it was. I said, when I come home, I'll run into the house, and I'll do is I'll clean out all the pots and stuff from the refrigerator from Shabbos, and clean it out, wash the stuff, put it away, so that when the food comes out of the oven after Rosh Hashanah, she'll be able to just, close it and then have space in the fridge to put it out, and it'll make her night end earlier, and she'll also be able to get to sleep at a normal time, which will probably be 4 hours after me. But I'm saying, right, different definitions of normal. But I'm saying, and then I said, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I go, what am I, an idiot? That's what I would like. She would, I do that, and she'd appreciate it, but that's why I said, okay. So on my way home from Marv, I say, hey, Dvora, I said, things have been crazy. The house is upside down. I said, I feel like we haven't connected. I said, you want to go to Brewster's? And she says, oh my gosh, that is so sweet. She hangs up on me. I'm thinking, okay, is that good or bad, right? House is very close. I pull in, she's in the driveway. She gets in the car. She goes, that is so sweet. That is so nice. I can't believe you asked me to go to Brewster's. So we go to Brewster's, we get out, and then she says to me, when we get there, I said, all right, what do you want? She goes, I'm not hungry. I said, what do you mean? I'm taking you for ice cream. She goes, well, I figured, with what's going on in our house, there was no way I was making you dinner, so I figured you were hungry, you were getting something to eat, so you asked me to come along. That's so sweet. I said, Devora, after I finished my client, as I'm running through the kitchen, I tasted the roast you're making for Yontif. I'm flation. I can't have ice cream. So I said, you better get some ice cream. She goes, fine. So she gets a little thing of ice cream. We sit for 10 minutes. Vashi eats our ice cream. We go back in. The next day I get a text and a call. Aaron, that was so sweet. I can't believe you did that. I know how busy you are. I know how focused you are on getting ready to focus for Rosh Hashanah. That was so nice. That, because her love language is quality time. Now I just want you to see, in terms of foreign, how we mess up and we miss it. I want you to imagine if the situation was reversed. If I'm sitting at a table and I'm trying to get a bunch of mailings done, and I'm cooking a million things, okay? And then I'm running this, I'm doing this, and my wife came over to me and said, Aaron, hey, how about you'd like to go to Brewster's? I'd be like, are you blind? No, really. Do you not see what I have going on here? What is your problem? Okay, maybe it might not, I don't know, but I'm saying, but you get the sentiment, meaning she would have been offering love, connecting love in a way, an act of service, but if that's not my love language, I'm not hearing it. It is not computing because she's not speaking my language. So you can start actually getting it by doing that. So those are the 5 love languages. I like to give that over. I don't know when this is supposed to finish, how long we're supposed to talk for, but I'd like to stop and open it up for questions if there are any. That actually is not a question. Are there any questions? Yes.
Which category does it fall into if you just want your wife to think that you're brilliant and wise and competent and visionary and that everything you say is so profound? Like,
very normal. Very normal. Yeah. What do you think? What does it sound like?
Affirmation.
Right? Meaning you would like to hear and know that she thinks that.
and not tell me I'm wrong.
That's a different problem. Right.
That was a brilliant question.
See, he got it faster than I did. Good, very good. Yes, but that's right. It's again, sometimes we could say, it comes out as a complaint, and then the person doesn't do it. If your spouse tells you, you never tell me I look good. You never say this. You never tell me that my this is. You never, and you're like, then it feels like it's not sincere. No, what they're telling you is that it could sound like they're telling you you're doing something wrong. But let's translate. Let's have your spouse learn how to say it differently, or say it like this. When I know that you are impressed or appreciate the efforts I make, nothing makes me feel better. Right? It's like, I love it when I know you're impressed with me because your opinion matters to me more than anybody. Mm-hmm. That's different than saying you never say it, saying no. Knowing that you like and admire or appreciate the things I do is like fuel for me. It makes me feel wonderful. That's a little different than saying you can't say anything nice ever. Once? Right. Any questions? Yeah. Yes.
So I'm asking for
Marcy's right.
asking for a friend. This is a friend for had it identified, but they seem to shift every once in a
No,
while.
actually, very good. The truth is that as we grow, as we get older, sometimes that can happen. But the truth is, when you're married to somebody very righteous and insightful, and they realize that it's their job to help you grow and expand your repertoire and be able to show the full scope of love languages, so that can very happen. And you should be appreciative and lucky that you have the opportunity to grow and learn more languages. What Neil is asking is true. You know, it's like sometimes to ask that is like when you say what happens, and then what you're supposed to say is it's not fair, have a meeting, and say make up your mind on it.
Just pick one to stick with.
Right, but the truth is right, but that's actually part of growth and part of things changing, right? Sometimes you realize something that you really craved or you liked at a certain point in your life that maybe you've learned a new language and now you're starting to appreciate it's feeling good. So if that occurs, so very often, again, here's the thing I know about husbands. We'll talk about this more when it's just the men, but you know, most of us are wired the same way. All of us just want to succeed, right? We hate it when we feel like we're messing up. And when our spouse is upset with us, all our wires get crossed, and we panic because we think we're being told we're failing, and we hate it, and we get defensive, and we get wrong, and it's an injustice, and it's terrible, and what is wrong with them? They're crazy. Oh, I'm sorry, I got carried away. My point is that your spouse wants to know. If your spouse knows you, then she knows you like to succeed. And if it shifts, all she has to do is say to you, hey, I know it might be frustrating, maybe there's no way for you to know, but it would mean a lot to me if you recognize what would really make me feel good is this, right? And then you'll do it. You won't mind if it shifts. You just want to be keyed in and not to feel like you failed. Just a clue.
That's all.
Right. I mean, she's organized. Why can't you send me a memo? But you know what I mean? It's like everyone's it's like this kind of takes some of the romance or the spontaneity. But like I've literally asked my wife. I'll say sometimes say, right now I'm actually well rested. I'm in a really good mood, and I have about 11 minutes, and I would love to show you love in some way, right? So if you could choose how I'm going to spend that 11 minutes, what would you like? She goes, seriously, like that's what you're asking me? I said, yeah, I thought that was a really nice offer. I said, it's only 10 now. Right? But you know what I mean? In other words, it's like in a certain way, sometimes, I mean, okay, that's a little bit, maybe cryptic, but I'm saying, or, to prescribe, but sometimes, we think that, like, what's wrong with saying to your spouse, hey, you're important to me, and I know we've been married for a long time, but I may not know where it itches, right? I would love to make you feel loved, right? So how can I do that? Yeah, but it can shift, it can move, right?
Is it okay to have more than one love?
Most people have two. I say that you can have all, some people say, when I tell them, you get the husbands or wives say, well, my spouse has all 5, go figure, right? They're all nice, right? But usually most of us have 2. I would say that there are 2 that are our primary. Not just one, not 1, 2,
Right, okay.
right? And it's fun to sometimes do research. And sometimes if you're not sure, right? So make it fun, make it something where you tell your spouse, I don't know. Let's see if we can figure it out. Okay. Yeah. Other questions? Yes.
Since we know that all men are the same and all women are the same,
Of course, that's the way it works.
what are the most common ones for men and what are the most common ones for women?
I don't know.
No.
I mean, I really.
Does Deborah know? Oh, you're welcome.
Meaning, what's the most common one for men? I mean, like, I'm trying to think, even if I were to answer that intelligently, like in my practice, like with the people I see, or if I think of my friends, all I know is this is not just you think in marriages that I see in my office, but when we, I do this in the communities, and people, all of us who have wonderful, wonderful marriages with the same challenges, everybody, is that very often, people say, wouldn't you think that people with the same love languages would marry each other? Wouldn't that be so much easier? But it just doesn't seem like that happens. Now, either it's because God has a really warped sense of humor, right? Or it's because from a perspective of our hashkafic vantage point, I think that there is something to it. I think there is no relationship that forces you to grow and expand like marriage. There is no other relationship where you are required, where it is, and you can't know you can have a great relationship with somebody outside of your marriage, right? But at some point you can put a limit. You can say, okay, I don't get along with them there. You know what I mean? Okay, we get along. I like them, but you can always recede, right, and withdraw. with your spouse, it forces you to expand, to grow, and I think that that idea, that very interestingly, so when you see people with different love languages, I don't know, I'd like to think there's a reason for that, because it's making us get beyond ourselves and learn about what it means to make another person feel cared for and loved in a way that's not always natural for us, and that can't be a bad thing. We only are better off and better people when we accomplish it. There's no question, even if it comes with a lot of, groaning and scraping noises. Whatever that means, okay? Yeah, so I didn't really answer the question, but I don't know the answer. Yes?
So I'm still trying to clarify.
Oh boy, wow.
Are you supposed to figure out what your own love language is and then figure out what your spouse's love language
I
is?
mean, which order?
Not order, because you could do both simultaneously,
Sure.
but does it really help to ask, the other person, like,
Yeah.
what's your love language? I don't know. What
Well,
do
if you,
supposed to do about that?
I mean, look, when you guys only have been married for a few years. Be patient. Right? But I mean, that you, Naftali, you want to help them out? Okay, we don't want to go there. That's just weird. Okay, right. Sometimes you could get a spouse who might say, like, what do you mean you don't know? Like, they want you to figure it out. That's fun there. I
I feel like it's a big guessing game.
well, it's a big guessing game. I mean, he likes to play coy, meaning I'm saying he's like, not going to tell you. But sometimes it's like, if you don't know, you say, here's what it looks like to me. Here's what, if I had to guess based on dynamics of relationship, am I on the right target? Usually you'll get an answer. Maybe sometimes they don't know.